There's a version of your life you keep referring to. Once this is over, once things calm down, once I get through this year. You talk about it like it's parked somewhere, engine running, waiting for you to finish the boring part and climb in. It isn't. Nobody is holding it for you. I want to tell you about a man who actually got there. Tal Ben-Shahar was an elite squash player before he became a psychologist at Harvard, and for years he carried around one clean, simple belief. If I win this tournament, I'll be happy. Not vaguely happy. Happy in the specific, final way a person means when they think the wanting will finally stop. So picture it, the last point. The one he'd been walking toward for months, maybe years. He wins. And he's happy. He'll tell you that himself. The happiness was real. For about a day. Then the same pressure crept back in. The same low hum of not enough. The same emptiness he'd been so sure this trophy was going to fill. He hadn't missed the target. That's the part that should bother you. He hit it dead center, stood in the exact spot he'd been aiming at his whole life, and found nothing there waiting. He gave it a name later. The arrival fallacy. The belief that reaching the thing is the same as arriving at the feeling. You've run this experiment too, probably more than once. The promotion, the move, the number in the account, each one was going to be the door, and each time you walked through it and found another hallway. And here's what makes this more than a modern complaint about burnout. 20 centuries before anyone had a term for it, a Roman was already writing letters warning people not to make this exact mistake. Same trap, different sandals. So if arriving doesn't do it, what's actually happening in your head while you wait? Your brain was never built to reward you for getting there. It was built to reward you for the walk. There's a scientist named Wolfram Schultz who spent years watching what dopamine actually does, mostly by studying monkeys and a bit of juice. And what he found rearranges how you should think about every goal you've ever set. Dopamine isn't the chemical of getting. It's the chemical of almost. It spikes when a reward is coming, when it's better than expected, when you can smell it but don't have it yet. And when the reward finally lands, exactly as predicted, right on schedule, the dopamine neurons do something that sounds almost cruel. Nothing. They go quiet. A reward you fully saw coming produces no signal at all. The brain has already moved on. It gets sharper than that, and this is the detail worth holding on to. Schultz didn't just find that a predicted reward gives you nothing. He found that when the reward is worse than you expected, when you were promised the juice and it doesn't come, the dopamine doesn't just stay flat. It drops below the baseline. It dips. So the machine in your head is running 3 settings, and only one of them feels good. Better than expected, you get the spike. Exactly as expected, you get silence. Worse than expected, you get a little pothole of disappointment. And notice which one finally reaching the goal you planned for years falls into. It's the middle one. Expected. Silence. Think about what that means for the finish line you've been staring at. You've been treating it like the payoff. Your nervous system treats it like old news the second it becomes certain. The wanting was the whole event. The having was always going to be a flat line. So that hollow feeling after you finally get the thing, the strange, quiet letdown you were too ashamed to mention because you were supposed to be celebrating, that wasn't ingratitude. It wasn't depression. It wasn't you being broken in some private way everyone else figured out. It was a brain doing precisely what it evolved to do: reward the chase, shrug at the catch. I used to think if I just wanted something badly enough, getting it would feel proportional. Like the size of the wanting set, the size of the payoff. Turns out my brain never signed that contract. It would hand me the thing, go completely silent, and start quietly drafting the next want before I'd even set the first one down. Which would explain the goal. It doesn't explain the waiting. People think waiting is neutral, like life is paused, not being spent. Like the months you spend getting through this part are held in some account, and the real spending starts later, once the conditions are right. That's the mistake. And it's an expensive one. In 2010, two Harvard psychologists, Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert, built an app that pinged people at random moments and asked three things. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? How do you feel? 250,000 of these little snapshots came back. And what they found is one of the more unsettling facts in modern psychology. People spend almost half their waking hours, 47%, thinking about something other than what they're actually doing, not the task in front of them, somewhere else, later, before, anywhere but here. And the people whose minds had wandered off were reliably less happy than the ones who were present. That part you might expect. Here's the part you can't argue your way out of. When they ran the timing, the wandering came first, and the unhappiness came after. The drifting wasn't the symptom, it was the cause. They checked something else, too, and this is the detail that should land on you. It didn't matter whether the daydream was pleasant, whether you were imagining something wonderful or dreading something awful, leaving the present cost you either way. The problem was never the content of the thought. It was the leaving. So sit with the arithmetic for a second. Waiting for your life to start isn't a pause before the mind-wandering study. It is the mind-wandering study. It's the exact behavior they measured, the one with the worst relationship to feeling okay, except you're not doing it for a few seconds at a red light. You're doing it for years. I've sat through entire dinners physically present and completely somewhere else, nodding in the right places, laughing a beat late, not there for one actual second of it, because some part of me was 3 months ahead in the version of my life where things had finally settled and I'd be allowed to relax and enjoy a dinner. I missed the dinner to think about a better dinner that did not exist. So the later account you keep drawing from, it turns out someone already tried to close it 2,000 years ago. Around the year 49, a Roman named Seneca sat down to write a letter to his father-in-law, and buried in it was a line that would insult most people if they actually understood it. The essay is called On the Shortness of Life, and Seneca's whole argument is that life isn't short at all. You're just spending almost none of it. Here's the line. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. Read that again slowly. Expectancy. The waiting itself. Not laziness, not bad luck, not the demands of your job. The habit of leaning into tomorrow is named directly as the single biggest thing standing between you and your own life. And he got specific about who he meant. He pointed at the people who say, when I'm 50, I'll retire into leisure. When I'm 60, I'll finally give up the public duties and live. And then he asks the question nobody once asked out loud. What guarantee do you have of a longer life? Who told you the schedule was yours to arrange? You're keeping the leftovers of your life for the version of you that might never show up. And here's the part that gives the whole letter its weight. Seneca wasn't writing this from a comfortable retirement, looking back with the easy wisdom of a man who'd figured it out in time. He wrote about the shortness of life, and then lived the warning. Years later, the Emperor Nero, a man Seneca had personally tutored, ordered him to die. And just like that, all the some days were gone. No leisure at 50, no quiet years he'd been promising himself. The man who wrote the most famous warning in history about assuming you'll get a later ran out of laters himself on someone else's schedule with no notice. He didn't write that line as theory. He wrote it as someone who could feel the clock. His student put it even harder. Epictetus told the people learning from him to stop treating their life like a rehearsal for their life. The crisis, he said, is now. The Olympics have started. Waiting is no longer an option. You keep thinking the real event is coming, that this is the warm-up, that the thing you'll be graded on hasn't begun yet. It began. You're in it. This ordinary afternoon is the Olympics, and you're checking your phone. I read that Seneca line the first time and felt a little insulted, honestly, like he'd somehow gotten hold of my calendar and read the little notes I write to myself. After this launch, once the kids are older, when work slows down, He wrote that 2,000 years before my calendar existed, and it still had my number. What's strange isn't that he said it, it's how exactly the data agrees with him. A Roman with no lab, no scanner, no sample size, no funding, looked at his own mind carefully enough to describe a mechanism that a Harvard team would spend 250,000 data points confirming 2,000 years later. Put the two side by side. Seneca says the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, the mind hanging on tomorrow, losing today. Killingsworth and Gilbert say the mind leaves the present nearly half the time, and that leaving is what makes us unhappy. Those aren't two related ideas. That's the same finding, discovered twice, by people who could never have met. One wrote it in ink and called it a moral failing. The other logged it on an iPhone and called it a statistical result. Same mechanism, same warning. The mind that lives in later pays for it in now. And that should unsettle you more than a single study ever could. Because a study you can wave off. Small sample, you'd say. Doesn't apply to me. But when a philosopher watching Roman senators and a scientist watching iPhone users arrive at the identical conclusion from opposite ends of history, the exit gets narrower. This isn't a quirk of one method. It's a description of what a human mind does when you leave it unattended. It drifts forward, and the drifting costs you the only part of your life you were ever actually holding. I don't think Seneca was smarter than us. I've thought about this a lot, and I keep landing in the same place. I don't think he had some ancient clarity we lost. I think he just wasn't as distracted. He had fewer places to hide from noticing his own mind. No feed to scroll when the thought got uncomfortable. He had to sit there with it until he saw it clearly. We've built an entire world designed to make sure we never have to. So what do you actually do instead? Not someday. Tonight. Nobody hands you your life back in one motion. There's no single decision, no morning you wake up cured of waiting. You get it back in 10-minute pieces. Some researchers actually measured this. A psychologist named Fred Bryant, working with colleagues, ran a study on something he calls savoring, which is a plain word for a specific act. Not having a good moment, deliberately staying inside one. In one version, they asked people to spend 10 minutes a day for a week, going back into a positive memory on purpose, a real one, sometimes with a photo in their hand, or some small object that pulled them back into it. Just 10 minutes. Attention turned around and pointed at something that already happened, instead of forward at something that hasn't. And the people who did it got measurably happier. Not for the 10 minutes. It stayed. It was still there when the researchers checked back later. Notice what that is and what it isn't. It's not a productivity system. It's not a way to want more, faster. It's almost the exact reverse of expectancy. Expectancy throws your attention forward into a tomorrow the brain won't reward and the data says will cost you. Savoring turns it back around and sets it down on something that's already yours, that nobody can take, that isn't waiting on any condition being met. If your brain won't light up for the arrival, and your mind drifts forward on its own the second you stop watching it, then the only move left is the deliberate one. Practicing, on purpose, the simple act of being where you already are. So go back to the start, that thing you've been waiting on, the launch, the move, the year that finally calms down, the point where you'll be allowed to begin. Look at it honestly and you'll notice something. When it arrives, it won't feel like arrival. You already know this, because the last 3 arrived and none of them did. And on the other side of it, there will be a new one. There is always a new one. The waiting was never going to end on its own, because the waiting was never about the thing. It was a habit wearing the mask of a plan. Your life didn't stop and agree to wait for you. It's been running this whole time. Every dinner you were too distracted to taste, every ordinary Tuesday you filed under later, that was it. That was the life, not the rehearsal for it. There's a whole philosophy built around the idea that later was never coming. It's quiet here, and it's been sitting on the shelf this whole time, waiting to be read, which is, when you think about it, the one thing it told you never to do.